Okay, hi class, Dr. Lindner. Let's talk about something pretty interesting here called the brain-gut connection or the gut-brain connection. Have you ever used the expression like it's a gut feeling? I could feel it in my gut or butterflies in my stomach when I'm nervous, right? We know that there is this connection between the brain and the gut. And if you ever look at a picture of the brain with all the gyri and all the sulcus, and you look at the intestines, they look pretty much the same, don't they? And I always consider them both organs that digest things. The intestines are digesting food, and your brain is digesting thoughts. So, food for thought there, no pun intended. So, there is a separate and ancient neural system, and it's known as the enteric neural system, and exists in the GI tract. The enteric nervous system includes the submucosal plexus and the myenteric plexus. And the neural system contains cells that are referred to as enterochromaffin cells. And these enterochromaffin cells, look what they produce. They produce serotonin. Hmm, that's a neurotransmitter. Interesting. The GI tract contains at least 7 different types of serotonin receptors. And when stimulated by serotonin, these receptors communicate with nerves that control digestive enzyme secretions, gastrointestinal motility, and serotonin also is a neurotransmitter used by the gastrointestinal tract to communicate with the CNS, the central neural system, which is the brain and the spinal cord. Now, if you have too much serotonin, here's what happens with too much serotonin. Your instructor tells you, okay, you're in class, take out your pens and paper, put everything away. You're going to have a surprise quiz. Oh my gosh, you get so nervous, you get so anxious, you got to run to the bathroom. That's what happens with too much serotonin. You get diarrhea. And if you have too little serotonin, you get the opposite. You get constipation. When there's this serotonin imbalance, too much, too little, this dysregulation, that's what we call irritable bowel syndrome. Okay. Now, when we look at this picture. My goodness. So, what we're looking at over here on top is the brain, and down here in the bottom is the intestines. Now, the intestines are made up of epithelium. You can see epithelium. And these are tight junctions, right? The cell um, connection between this cell and this cell, we have these tight junctions holding them together. And in here, this would be the lumen where you're going to have food that passes by, right? You're going to have short chain fatty acids, you're going to have bacteria, probiotics, prebiotics, all that stuff in your intestines. Now, if you have things like foods that you're allergic foods, you shouldn't have dairy and peanuts, but maybe you do. You shouldn't have flour, but maybe you do. Shouldn't have gluten, but maybe you do. Alcohol, NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, prednisone, um, antibiotics, alcohol, smoking. What these think, fried foods, high sugary foods, processed foods, what they do is they damage these tight junctions. And you start to get bacteria and pathogens that go from the gut and it starts to enter into systemic circulation. Now, there is a connection from the brain to the gut, and it's called the vagal nerve, which remember is cranial nerve number 10, and it controls about 90% of your parasympathetics. And it's protected by the top 2 vertebrae, C1 and C2, and that's because that's where the medulla oblongata sits, and the nucleus for cranial nerve number 10 sits right there. So there is this connection between the two. So through this nerve is a highway for either good chemical messages to get up to the brain, good bacteria to get up to the brain, good prebiotics, probiotics, good anti inflammatory messages to get up to the brain to make you feel good. Compared to creating this leaky gut, right? This permeable intestinal membrane, they call it intestinal permeability, or this leaky gut, where now you have damage. And oh, this is not good. How does this damage happen? Well, it can happen from these things, but it can also happen from here. If you're under lots of stress, and again, the stress could be emotional stress, or it could be the stresses from consuming allergic foods, flour, gluten, antibiotics, NSAIDs, alcohol. It could be those stressors to the body. They're going to stimulate the pituitary gland, which sends signals to the adrenal gland. The adrenal gland creates these glucocorticoids. These glucocorticoids can also be damaging to the gut. And now you get this gap, this lesion, think of it as a lesion, and you get this bad bacteria that's created that starts to ride up. And these bad bacteria create pro inflammatory messengers. They're called pro inflammatory cytokines. These pro inflammatory cytokines also go up the vagal nerve into the brain. So, this is why it's really important to ask yourself, how do I feel after the meal? That's a good indicator. So, the vagal nerve, your thoughts can affect your gut in a good way. Happy thoughts, healthy thoughts, healing gut. Destructive thoughts, destructive foods, destructive lifestyle habits can damage it even more. Okay, it's that brain, that gut brain connection. Now, intestinal permeability, what ends up happening furthermore is that these villi right here, you can have proteins. Let's say this is part of your hamburger. Now, part of your hamburger can't fit through in here. You have digestive enzymes that have to break that down into very, very small particles, right? When they get small, the villi can absorb those smaller nutrients and pull it into systemic circulation, into your blood supply. Now, when you have intestinal permeability, you have gaps. Now, this protein can fit through here, larger than what it should be, enters your systemic circulation, and your body says, what is this large protein? It doesn't belong here. And what does your body do with foreign proteins? It attacks it. Your bodies make antibodies against it. Now, if the frequency of the vibration of this protein happens to match the same vibrational frequency of the protein on your thyroid, your body makes antibodies that attack the protein to this food and the protein to your thyroid. Or the protein of the food matches the hyaline cartilage between the joints, then we call it rheumatoid arthritis, or we call it Hashimoto's, thyroiditis. So, a lot of autoimmune diseases can come from leaky gut, having these proteins cross this intestinal barrier, which is unhealthy, upregulating this immune response. And sometimes they call that molecular mimicry, when we want it to attack this foreign protein, but it starts attacking other proteins on other organs and parts of the body. It's kind of like seeing someone from behind, they're walking and you tap them on the shoulder, they turn around and, oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were someone else. Okay. So, how do we heal this up? You can heal this up with something that we call the 4R or the 5R program. So, one of the R's, R, 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 R. So 4R, I hear now it's called a 5R, where you remove the toxin. Well, maybe it's alcohol, maybe it's fried foods. Then you replace with digestive enzymes. Then you reinoculate with probiotics and prebiotics. Then so you remove the irritant, you replaced with digestive enzymes, you reinoculate it with good probiotics and prebiotics and fermented foods, and then you can repair things like glutamate and zinc and vitamin A. These are all things that can help heal the gut. And then you can rebalance. Rebalance means focusing on healthier lifestyle approach so that this doesn't reoccur. Okay. So when we come back, we'll get into our next topic.